Welcome to this Saturday night panel titled Singleton Living Laneways as part of the Ars Electronica Festival 2021. Firstly, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Awabakal and Worimi people, the traditional custodians of the land on which myself and the other panelists are presenting from today. My name is Christopher Minsky, and I'm joined here today by a fantastic panel of artists, researchers, academic and cultural producers that are behind a remarkable project that is using art to activate a regional town in the Upper Hunter region of New South Wales. I would firstly like to introduce Professor Paul Eccleston. Paul is the head of School of Creative Industries at the University of Newcastle. His work bringing together makers, communities, and technology spans almost 2 decades and is recognised nationally and internationally. In 2018, he set up the Future Art, Science and Technology Laboratory, the FASTLab, as a collaborative translational research hub to deliver transformational research with global impact. Before moving to Australia in 2017, Paul founded the successful Media Innovation Studio in the UK, doing cool things with people in large media organisations, such as the BBC, Haymarket, and Google. He's done a few other awesome things like setting up the Civic Drone Centre, having his work nominated in top 100 design ideas displayed at the London Design Museum, and making a few dozen TV documentaries for UK and international broadcasters. Welcome, Paul. I would now like to introduce Christopher Saunders. Christopher Saunders has worked in the arts for over 20 years as an affiliator and social change initiator. He was creative producer for 15 years with arts and social justice organisation Big Heart, and was the general manager of Renew Newcastle for 5 years. In 2019, Christopher was the sessional academic at the School of Creative Industries for Newcastle University. He is currently in the final days of a 2-year contract with Singleton Council as a specialist in arts and culture. Dear colleague Nicole Carroll, Dr. Nicole Carroll hails from the United States and calls Providence, New York City, Vermont, and Arkansas home. She is currently lecturing digital composition at the University of Newcastle in Australia. Nicole is a composer, performer, sound designer, and electronic instrument builder working with audio, video, and tangible objects. Her work spans installation, improvisation, fixed media, and she also works in dance and theatre. Welcome, Nicole. And finally, Dr. Ralph Kenke. Ralph Kenke is a visual communication designer and media artist and design educator. He received his PhD at the University of Newcastle on his study of prototyping data portraits, where he is teaching as a design lecturer and researcher at the FASTLab. Ralph has held multiple positions as a design consultant and senior designer, working alongside companies such as Deloitte, M&C Saatchi, and Imagination, delivering conceptual design applications that bring art, technology, and design together. So this is the Singleton Living Laneways project panel. This is powered by the university's FASTLab, and this brings spaces to life through a suite of engaging, high-impact activations that celebrate creative life and community identity. So first of all, I would like to actually throw to you, Christopher, just so you can explain a little bit about Singleton as a destination and the background to the project.
Thanks, Christopher. So Singleton is a town that celebrated its bicentennial last year, 200 years of European settlement there. It's had a sort of rich history of as being a mining town, but prior to that, an agricultural town. It's funny because when I went to work there 2 years ago, people said, "Oh, you're going to go and do arts and culture there. There's not really much there." And I sort of begged to differ, but I didn't know much about that till I scratched the surface. It really does have an extraordinary Indigenous history as well. And it's about its geographical location really being a bit of a crossroads to opening up the pathways further north from this part of the country. Of course, more recently, the coal, which was discovered there, has been the major focus, and people know. I mean, the town is known internationally now as the place that so much coal comes from. We're all here in Newcastle, which is the biggest coal port in the world, and so much of that coal is coming from that region around Singleton, with the big holes in the ground, and shipping it out across the globe. What wasn't perhaps known was perhaps about the people who lived there, who were actually performing that work, and the many other agricultural stuff that was going on as well. So this was an opportunity for me when I came to work there to sort of tap into that and explore the people in that community.
Okay, that's great, Christopher. And can you then also, if you wouldn't mind, just give a little bit of an overview of an introduction to this project and what this idea was basically all about, to bring in artists and technologists as a way to engage with the community and the city. And as I understand, you were very interested around this topic of also not only the future, but also identity.
I think the identity was the key starting point, because I felt, having worked there in the early stages, that a lot of people said to me, you know, Singleton's lost its identity. It's defined as a mining town. But as I mentioned before, it does have this rich history before, but no one really knew how to articulate that. And the reason that my work was, my position was created, was because Singleton was investing in building an arts and cultural centre. And so that they wanted someone to come in and advise on how we made sure we got the right centre built, but how that was going to work in a community. And of course, my background is very much about working with people, and this notion of art being the stories that are told, or the untold stories that come from people in that community. This particular Laneways project came about because of COVID. It was about creating spaces within the city that moved people away from the places that they normally gathered, the shopping complexes, the malls, creating places in the city that they could then access in a safe way. So this opportunity came with the funding to engage the university and subsequently Art Thinking and Ars Electronica to work in the way that you do, with people and with ideas and technology. And I was very excited about that, because I think there's a perception, really arts and culture wise, in a very general sense, that it's about painting pictures and put them on a gallery wall, or having a piece of sculpture. And of course, as we all know, it can be so much more than that. That was the exciting opportunity I think we had to explore.
Thanks a lot for that background, Christopher. And yes, I think it's the project is such an important milestone also, because it was the first major project I worked on together with the FASTLab and with Paul, and as part of starting my work there, working closely with the FASTLab, also as a researcher for the FASTLab, but also this opportunity that we could connect to Ars Electronica and to Art Thinking. But my understanding, you know, when I came into this, the heavy work, I guess, had already been done. You guys had already been talking about this idea. And I think that a part of what Paul, and in particular his co-director, Mario Minicchiello, had already started to discuss with you, was the idea of this intersection of future art, technology and society, and how this could start to come together into the space and be very useful for this project. So I might just throw over to you now, Paul, to talk a little bit more about the background of this sort of fascinating idea. And I think also you wear the hat as the chief investigator. So I think it's really interesting to get your perspective just in the context of applied research, applied creative research, which you were talking about yesterday, and how this kind of all fits together and what this project represents and means to you in the context of the FASTLab.
Yeah, thanks, Christopher. And that's, look, in terms of research, so we set up this thing that we call a research lab, the Future Art, Science and Technology Laboratory. There's nothing new. It dates back to the Enlightenment, but post-Enlightenment, obviously, we've done a fair amount of work in terms of progressing humanity through sort of single disciplines, but they're beginning to kind of lose a little bit of steam as we recognise that some of the issues that are facing humanity, contemporary issues, need multiple skill sets in order to kind of confront some of those issues and take us forward. And so it's kind of back to the future, in as much as FASTLab thought that integration of art, science and technology was definitely a good one. We called it future because its future always speaks to me of human imagination. It's about imagining things that perhaps don't exist yet, that we haven't thought of yet. So the future bit was kind of really important to me when we started that. And then the art, science and technology was just, well, artists obviously take technology and use it to express themselves. And there's lots of great examples in the project that we're about to see from the artists here who are on the webinar tonight that demonstrate that. They express their vision through creativity, using technology to do that. And scientists actually use technology, of course, to help us get to grips with it, to mine data. They use technology to find stuff out and help us understand the world about us through that data. So the combination of those things has always been kind of important for FASTLab. And if that sounds high level, it probably is. But for us, in terms of this project, the thing that I really loved about it, and you'll see this through the work as the artists show you what they've been doing, is that we were looking at 3 or 4 quite different ways of being able to interact with community through art. And I'm not going to say too much about the projects, but you'll have to forgive me for giving a line or two that says, that Shadowgram encouraged people to place themselves in a story. That's the piece that Chris was talking about in terms of identity, recognizing that identity. Ralph's piece, as he'll explain, physically transforms a laneway into like a magical place that as you move around, it interacts with you. So there's a physical kind of interaction there. There's a workshop originally planned around origami and robotics to bring community together to have conversations with each other. That's another kind of research methodology that we can use to find out a little bit about how people think, not just about the art and the artworks, but where it is that they're living. And Nicole's here online tonight, and her colleague John Drummond have been doing something quite specific with sound and engaging communities in participation to create content. All of those for us are what we would call kind of action research, practice-based research methods, all of which are rooted absolutely firmly in the creative industries and firmly in the kind of ethos of FASTLab, but also, I think, further down the line, beneficial to people like Chris, Singleton Council, and our local community in terms of helping them, as Chris has alluded to, sort of perhaps understand the world in a slightly different way, to engage with communities and meet them where they are, beyond just thinking about sending out surveys or inviting them to town hall meetings. This is a really cool visual way of being able to do that. And that's kind of the ethic of FASTLab, I guess.
Okay, thanks a lot for that great overview, Paul. I just also would like to now let our international and our local viewers know that while we did have a 30-minute slot allocated for this session, it will be able to continue for a little bit longer. I don't want to keep the panel too late tonight. And you will notice there is a question and answer function there. So if we do have time at the end, we're hoping that we'll be able to also respond to a few questions. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the individual projects. So there were 4 activations that had been planned, and I will just now share my screen again and talk about the Shadowgram. So again, as I mentioned before, this project was very special, and I think probably in the history books, when we have another 10 years along, and the many projects I think it will be coming that with between the university and Ars Electronica and this great partnership that's growing will be quite significant. But this was the first one, and when I came into the project and I heard a bit about what was happening here, and there was already this meta theme around this idea of catalyzing, engaging with the community. So this project that was originally invented by the Ars Electronica Future Lab seemed quite fitting, and the opportunity was there, and through the partnership again with FASTLab with the university, we were able to realize this here locally. It had happened once before up in Brisbane for another project. There were some artists up there that were involved, and also some fabricators that helped with the main unit, but it's still very much needed to be brought in and contextualized into this situation and basically repurposed for this specific contribution to this overall dialogue. So here you can see a picture of the actual apparatus there in the background, and I'm just going to jump forward through here. I've got a little video. I'll just play a little bit of this just to give you a bit of an impression. There's the wonderful Christopher Saunders at the work, explaining a little bit about the project. And here you can see basically the apparatus is used for the participants to make a shape, a silhouette of themselves, and then this is coming out of the back of the apparatus as a miniature version. So one thing that's really important about this, I think the overall concept, which I love, is that on the one hand, each shape is unique, but on the other hand, there's a level of anonymity to it. So it's very playful. And then there's the secondary part of the process. You can see taking the actual shadowgram and then applying it to the wall. But importantly, the final part of the process is to actually take also then a speech bubble and make some kind of comment. So you're actually then forming part of a large social collaborative dialogue. And again, part of the important contextualization that was happening was on these topics to do with what's happening in Singleton and identity. So I'll let Paul talk a little bit about that, because I think that's important in terms of what were those topics that we wanted to address.
Yeah, I think, and again, I'd probably, again, welcome Christopher's input into this. We were genuinely thinking as we started down this road of what I was thinking, certainly as the kind of lead investigator, we definitely want to use art. We want to put those objects and these installations, experiences into those locations. We want to see if we can use those as ways of engaging the community through the work, knowing that also that we'd have that added benefit of being able to hopefully we'd learn a lot. We'd be able to help the City Council build capacity to move beyond perhaps some of the other work that they've been doing previously, and certainly other work that we'd done previously as well. That's always a challenge, but it creates that capacity, expertise, and so on. And so we knew that that would be a byproduct of what we were doing. But what we were really interested in is to get some feedback from the public about what they thought about where they lived, and also what we believe to be as kind of creatives and makers, the cool stuff that we were doing with them. So Shadowgram marked the start of that process, and as we start to look beyond the project at the data that we'll gather from those community members who've participated in the installation so far, I'm hoping that we'll be able to demonstrate that actually art does definitely, to use the old advertising slogan, reach parts that other types of engagement can't possibly reach.
I think that was the surprise about it, Paul, and the great joy about this is because it's very difficult sometimes to consult with a community and get them to have feedback into how they may perceive their community, or what they might want to see in the future. Shadowgram was a way that people accidentally came upon us in this laneway, and we would of course encourage them to engage in a kinetic way, in a way that it's not clear who those people are. It's a silhouette that you have there, so those people who participate know it's them. They've put their voice out there, but they're not recognized necessarily by anybody else. And they're not necessarily people who would attend a consultation session that council may run to voice their views about how they see the future. And one of the things I really loved about this idea was that we asked the three questions about, the future of industry, the future of community, the future of place, and how people saw that. And so there was some lovely surprises, and also some lovely engagements with people in quite tender ways and empathic ways that people felt valued, I think. and it kind of, there was something that it held people embraced people in the way that they were valued by having their image captured and their thought captured as well. And there were so many lovely examples that happened there. Older women, particularly older people, particularly who just sat and reflected, who weren't going to engage. One of the things I really want to encourage people is this sense of play. And people always think, oh, this would be a great thing for the kids to do. And to me, people said, we should get the kids, we get the schools in. I thought, no, we shouldn't get the schools in. We want adults to play, and we need to encourage grown-ups to play. And I think that this had a great sense of play, and that was really encouraging to explore that.
Thanks very much for that input, Paul and Christopher. And I just want to give also a shout out to another great colleague from the FASTlab, Dr. Ari Chand, who came up with these fantastic wall designs. So yes, we had the three different topics that were being addressed, the three themes, so around community, around industry, and also future of place. And a really massive, awesome outcome, I thought, anyway. There on the right, you can see Christopher in the library in Singleton, and they decided to keep these walls after the actual 3-week activation. And now this is kind of an ongoing discussion point, as I understand.
Well, in fact, Christopher, the idea is that when the Arts and Culture Centre is finished, and it's not finished yet, this will form part of a display in the centre when we continue to consult with the community about how they see the future of Singleton in 2030. So it keeps going. It has a life. Again, if we start talking about art, I like that idea that we're doing this in a laneway down in the city, and then in 6 months' time, it'll be in this art gallery, this hallowed space where, so one imagines this, great artwork is. But hang on a minute, it's the work that we did back in the town, and we've been part of this. It's been a participatory, creative process, and so it's challenging those ideas about what participation and creativity is.
Fantastic. Again, I just want to remind our audience, for those that are on a tight schedule, I think we will go over time. I don't want to rush the artists as we talk about these upcoming works. And also this important, I think, bigger theme that was introduced a little bit before by Paul and backed up now by, I think, what Christopher's saying, this remarkable project where a place like Singleton is kind of leading the way as an example of, I guess, some other kind of, let's say, a modern renaissance in itself. So thanks a lot. It was great to talk about that project. There's a lot more we could say about it, but we will move on now to the next project. And this is from Ralph Kenke. I'll just stop the share for a moment so we can say hi to Ralph, and then I'll bring up some footage. Welcome, Ralph.
Hi, Christopher.
Thanks for being here. I'm just going to start to play the video, and I'll allow you to talk about this wonderful project.
Great. So I'll just wait for the video quickly to come up because I think it makes more sense. So we see the laneway. This is Burns Lane, and we see Burns Lane cloud there in our sort of second sketch that we came up with. So when we initially saw the laneway, we didn't know immediately what we were planning to do or what we could do to activate the laneway, but we observed kind of the surroundings, and we noticed that it's cars are usually driving through the road, and we really thought, what can we do to kind of give more purpose or meaning to this place for people? And we came up with this idea. It would be great people could just spend some time and start not just transferring from A to B through this lane, which is usually what they've been doing, but actually starting to spend some more time in the laneway. So then we proposed a fairly bold project to Christopher and suggested to create this cloud made out of media balloons. That's our kind of research project that we developed. So a balloon that will respond to people, and people can kind of control the balloon, I guess, as they enter Burns Lane. What I think was interesting, and there's a lot of like iterations, and we didn't have I guess a final product. So there was a lot of like in this process, we just had to have a lot of conversations around details and what we thought we could do, but at the same time, it was never. We had no product that we can say this is the final balloon, this is how it happened. So it was for us a real playground as researcher to develop a new a new kind of I guess piece of art, but at the same time we felt like we wanted to really offer the community something, and we did have kind of in conversations we heard there was a bit of a divided opinion about shutting this street and this road. So some people obviously benefit from driving through, and others were really excited to see this becoming a space. So we thought that having this kind of temporary experience where you can control this kind of cloud for a while individually, it's just a short temporary experience. It's kind of like the experience with driving through as well, this kind of common experience there, but in a community sense this time. So you're leaving the car and actually you kind of have this experience, encounters with strangers, which we thought, that was something we really were aiming for, and we're glad when we actually installed the cloud and saw people engaging with it. It was really quite a good feeling to see that we accomplished that.
Wonderful, Ralph. I mean, I have to say, just seeing this project, and by the time you came into this project, we kind of loosely sketched out this idea of, there was an interest in projection mapping, and I think we had the placeholder of visual laneway. But to see how you came in with the team, with the other FASTlab researchers, you had a student involved in the project, you had another collaborator from your past work that you brought in, another researcher, and you just invented this incredible new type of medium format. And I think it's just exceptionally good work. I've just had a confirmation. I was just waiting before I said that before. The webinar will continue, so I will be, for those, I think some of the international audience that do have to leave, I will make sure that the whole recording is available afterwards, so you'll be able to go and watch this afterwards. But for the audience that can remain, we will continue on. And just before we jump into the next work, I didn't know whether maybe you wanted to say a quick word or something on that one, Paul, because I think you were heavily involved in seeing this project also from the initial.
I mean, the first thing, absolutely, compliments to Ralph. This is a phenomenal, great piece of work, and Christopher for helping kind of produce that. But also to Chris, this is a really brave thing. This is a really brave thing for local councils to have to try and endeavour. None of this is easy. And as much as it's worthwhile and gratifying, magical for us to see it in situ, we know how difficult it is to do work like this. But we can also prove that it's possible. And the only other thing that I would want to say is that the most beautiful thing, and Ralph's articulated this really, really well as he talked about how they iterated this process. The thing that makes us human and binds us together as human, and it's almost a unique quality of our humanness, is imagination. And it's our ability then to imagine things, but then not just imagine things, but then actually put what we could imagine into being, bring that into being. And this piece of work is a really beautiful example of humanity, of us not quite knowing what we're doing at the very beginning, then being able to imagine an alternative state, but then together, collaboratively working with all the stakeholders, whether they were practical policy, whether they were work health and safety, whether they were creative visionaries, whether they were looking after the logistics, we can bring that to fruition and demonstrate that we do have agency here as human beings. We can change our futures if we can imagine.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
If I may say on the end of that, and that's exactly how it landed in the community. It was the most disruptive of the activations that we did. It did polarize the community, but it did mean that people imagined, that what was possible with what is a roadway. It's now back as a roadway. And people were very upset that they lost their roadway. But I love the way that Ralph came early on and said, it is a roadway at the moment, therefore let's make it something completely different. We put a ceiling over a roadway. I mean, I had some wonderful conversations with people in there. My husband hates this, but I'm sat here talking to you. I would never have sat in the middle of this road before and had this conversation. I actually love this. It was a great conversation. There were many others just like that. So it landed so well, and that's what we wanted to do. And again, hats off to the council for being brave enough to take on something like this, because it did upset a few people, let's be honest. But we did it, and we would do it again.
Thanks, Christopher. I was actually just going to throw back to you about that. So maybe just quickly before we jump to that next work from the audio acoustic laneway that's coming up, Christopher, could you just explain a little bit more, because I think this is really interesting for the audience to hear about, to your role in that, but for this council, for Singleton, to take that step, to take that initiative, to make this project happen. Where did that come from? What was the kind of, what was the main impetus behind this?
It really, it was about trying to roll out programs when we didn't have a venue. So we were building this centre, and there's this focus on the centre, but I kind of felt that it needed to, it's this thing of, well, we'll wait for the centre to happen before we can do anything creative or culturally. No, we don't. We can actually start doing that sort of stuff in the actual town itself. And that's where this came from. And who can we work with to do that? And who better to work with it than the university, which is important, again, to have that sense of a tertiary institution having reach into a community that perhaps doesn't see itself connected with that institution. So there are many wins, but it's about trying to work and be open to ideas and possibilities by just asking people to play, come and do something. What can you do? And of course, we did have some money to do that. And it always makes a difference if you do have some funding to be able to say, we've got this, what can you do?
Thanks a lot. There might be a chance to talk about also where some of that funding came from later, but one part of that, as I understand, was to do with some kind of activation post the first initial COVID disruption. And of course, the interesting thing about the project is, on the one hand, we were building up these projects as response to that, and through the process, we also have become disrupted once again because of COVID. And as a result, some of the projects that we were planning have now had to have been, on the one hand, postponed. On the other hand, they have also been pivoted in quite interesting ways. And the next project I'm very interested to tell you about, and to also hear from the main artist involved, is happening to activate the Trabella Laneway. It's the acoustic alley. So this will be an audio installation piece. And I will now quickly stop sharing the screen, and then I'll bring it back on just to introduce Nicole, who will talk a little bit about this project. Hi, Nicole, are you still there?
I'm here.
Great, thanks for being here. So I'll just share the screen again and let you talk through this amazing project that you have started and now had to pivot a little bit, but somehow it continues on.
Yes, so I am talking about a thing that has not actually come into being yet, but slowly it's happening. There are prototypes. So the acoustic alley is an audio installation, and it will be in the photo that you see there, with field recordings and embedded speakers in the benches that are like far in the back there. Yeah, let me That's all right. Just stick there for a second and I'll tell you when to flick through. So from the onset, John Drummond and I knew that we wanted to create a piece that was not only for Singleton, but about Singleton. John and I are really sensitive to the fact that neither he or I are from Singleton, so we had to make a piece that was really a vehicle for community participation and community voices. John and I both work in the areas of acoustic ecology and soundscape composition, where we are making music from recordings of natural landscapes. So it was really a no-brainer that the primary sound source material for this piece would include field recordings made by John and myself with contributions from the community, hoping that we can reel in those backyard birders and people that have been involved in community science projects, citizen science projects. So I did a bit of Google Map recon before we headed over and found some locations that I was really interested in recording, especially the mining pits, the trains carrying coal, and some dams or watering holes outside of town, which I knew would be meccas for wildlife and birds. Beyond that, John and I didn't really know what the shape of this piece would be until we actually visited Singleton and the Laneway itself. And once we got to the Laneway, we were really surprised to see benches and planters, which we hadn't seen in the initial site photos. And from that, we were really excited. And immediately, when we saw those benches, we knew that we were going to mount the speakers inside the benches, and the benches would become the speakers. So also, once we were on that site, we realized that this laneway was not an abandoned alley on the edge of town, but it was actually a popular walking route from the main street to the market center. So with that in mind, we knew we had to create an evolving piece that would be different every time somebody walked down the alley, rather than it being a static work on loop. And thinking about this piece through a lens of acoustic ecology, we really wanted to encourage awareness of the aural landscape and really repeated detailed listening of the world around us. And we know that from day to day, when we're going through the same routines, the same places, seeing the same faces, we tend to tune out, we lose interest, but in including works from the community and those works changing every time someone works through, we hope that we are not only creating interest in the laneway itself, but hoping that people will be spurred to keep listening to their own landscapes, to their own backyards. And that's really the concept behind the piece. So if we want to flick through the next slide, that's a picture that John and I took when we were on our recon. So far, we've only had actually one physical recon mission to Singleton. So we went into town, we checked out the laneways, and then we drove all around through the farmlands. There were some birds, a lot of cows, but one thing that I really realized that even though that the main highway was miles out, we could hear it clean and clear. And so there were no trees, it was just farmways and open air for those sounds to really cut through. And just thinking about this from an acoustic ecology standpoint, thinking, these birds, like there's never a moment of silence. Even when we think there's nothing around, there is always sound. So that's kind of our thinking in, presenting these field recordings, gathering field recordings, and putting them in this laneway for people to keep hearing over and over and over again. And if we want to flick through to the next slide. So this is an image of Rainforest 5 installation that was realized by composers inside Electronica in 2011. That is a piece that was developed by David Tudor. The Rainforest 4 I believe was first realized in 1973. So the concept of using speakers or transducers to resonate other objects, to turn other objects into speakers, harkens back to David Tudor. I had the great pleasure of working with composers inside Electronica for this particular installation in 2011. And since then, whenever I get a chance to put a transducer on something to resonate a material that we don't think of as a speaker, I take the chance. So we want to flick through. Next slide. So these are the planters and the benches, and those benches are hollow, so that will allow us to actually put all of the components of the installation, all of the electronics actually inside the bench. So when you walk through the alley, you don't see anything. You don't see anything that's obviously an audio installation. There's no speakers, there's no solar panels, there's no cables and wires, everything is tucked in. So hopefully whenever a person walks through, once they walk through and they trigger the sounds, it's like, oh, well, that's nice and a little bit unexpected. Yes, and I think we can flick through.
I may need to get the sound. Are you hearing sound on that one?
Yes, although this is just test sound, but this is just one of the images of the prototype. So we have been on hiatus for actually putting it in the place in Singleton. So I've just been making prototypes at home. So this is one of the actual sound speaker transducer modules. The thing that you see bouncing around, that's a transducer. Ideally, it will be fixed onto or inside the bench on one of the panels, and we'll have several of these speakers in the benches, and each one will have a different sound or field recording from the benchers, so we'll get different sounds of different places at the same time, so that it presents a unique sort of audio mixing environment. And the other things, it's just a little amp and an Arduino microcontroller with an SD card player. It'll be stuck inside a plastic box to keep it all weatherproof, because it is a bench, it is outside, so we know it's got to be weatherproof. And that's it.
That's
and I think there's
thank you, Nicole.
is that one more? No, that's it.
Slide, but I just wanted to make the comment. My understanding is there doesn't need to be a pandemic on for you to be creating these kind of prototypes at home. You're a world-renowned instrument inventor and builder of some kind that takes these incredible contraptions all over the world and performing normally when, of course, COVID is not on. But to then bring yourself with these other researchers and your other collaborators into Singleton to make this project, I think it's just so fantastic. And then there is the website, which I think it still needs a little bit of tweaking, but my understanding is this is about to go live also, and maybe you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so the website is for our community participation, and so I'll just go ahead and shift over to what we're actually doing now. I mean, the physical installation will happen when COVID allows it to happen, but in the interim, we've decided to put it online. So John and I can't leave. And now, yeah, John has actually been in lockdown far longer than we have in Newcastle. So that's sort of put us on hiatus. And initially we thought that John and I were going to collect field recordings. We have a lot of high-end equipment, and we were going to go out and get these really nice multi-channel ambisonic recordings to pair with the community recordings. But since we can't get out, we can't get the recordings, we're relying on the community recordings to be the backbone of this piece for now, for our the web version. And we're just going to collect recordings. You can pop them in. The repository is directly on that website, so the link is there. It doesn't have to be a great recording. It can be from your phone if you catch a pair of noisy miners squawking away, or I don't know, something interesting happening in the streets. I know we can't go that far right now that we're in lockdown, but whatever you can get, whatever you can hear from your home, we want to hear what you are hearing. And this piece is about what you are hearing. So it's the community sounds. And so the link on the website, that's where it goes, and we will curate those. And so we'll develop basically a playlist that we'll host on SoundCloud for now, and that'll just give you a little teaser. From that, we'll also give a little bit of background about the recorder, the recordist, whose sounds they are. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of background knowledge about, or information about what they're hearing, so that people, when they go onto the website or SoundCloud, they know what they're listening to. And then when we get the chance, we'll stick it in a bench, and it'll be and we'll put it live. So it's it's a little bit of a teaser, but it's nice. I think at this point, and even without the pandemic, it's great to have multimodal delivery of these pieces. I mean, there's no reason why. I mean, it's all digital audio anyways. There's no reason why we can't put it online, and there's no reason why it shouldn't also be online. So, despite COVID, I think it's fine.
It's a great example of how you've also just been able to pivot the project and come up with a new idea. So this is actually, it's not completely finished yet, but I believe this will be going live in the next few days. Here's part of the website. I've actually just been throwing an eye on it where we're working on. So it'll be a very simple interface for the people to upload their audio content. And then as we had discussed, we are then making the secondary plan, of course, like a lot of artists and cultural producers all over the land and all over the world now at the moment, finding and waiting to see other ways. So once the restrictions here in Australia open up enough, that we will then be actually implementing the work. And I actually love the idea of this approach now. And then when it does open up again, you can do some more field recordings, and it'll be this whole mixture between the community recordings and your own recordings. And I'll just mention this one very briefly, and then we'll have a little bit of a closing discussion. So this is the other work. We're very fortunate to have alumni from the University of Newcastle, Dr. Matthew Gardner. Matthew is a world-leading expert in the field of orobotics. That's a term that he coined. Matthew does these amazing workshops where he combines origami and robotics together. And for this project, the team, including myself and Paul and the others from the FASTlab, reached out to Matthew and started to talk to him about how we could come up with a little bit of a different approach. And then we got together with Christopher, and the idea is that we would involve Matthew and his orobotic workshop as a way to make some community participation. So first layer of education to learn the basic principles of robotics and origami. And then together the community will create, I think we're looking at up to 100 of these origami flowers inside this other laneway that will be activated, which I think is a bit further down here, the evidence laneway. Again, this one is on hold. Originally, we planned to do the origami robotic workshops in the library with the physical participants. We are now pivoting as well. We're thinking about doing a home delivery service of the origami robotics kits. And I've been talking with Matthew last week, and he's totally on board. So we're looking to basically roll out, send the kits to people's homes and do the first part of the workshop and the educational experience online. And then the kit will be ready to go. And once the COVID restrictions ease and we're able to activate the laneway, everybody will come down with their origami flowers, and we will lather this laneway with 100 flowers. And the flowers also, it's quite ingenious, the system that Matthew has invented. They also respond to data sets. So that depends on what data sets you're able to load into that. So again, there's a lot more I could say about that project. You can see my screen there. There's the fastlaborobotics.soci.org.au. All the information's there. Really promote you to go and check that out. And I think we might just throw the final word back over to you, Christopher, as a little bit of a summary. If you have anything to add before I go to the question and answer.
I just want to be able to get this stuff out. It's so great to hear you talk about that, Nicole, because we haven't, it's all been so conceptual, and I know it's going to be fabulous. And the whole robotics thing, we've been going round and round circles with that. It's so frustrating wanting to have that momentum with this community who are embracing the idea. People have said to me in recent days how excited they've been with the initiatives that have been happening over the last 12 months. And of course, we're all in this terrible situation where we're just going, let us out, let us play.
We have a question here in the chat, which is asking about, well, firstly, congratulations on all the projects. There's a question about where we can find and participate, for example, in the Shadow project. Funnily enough, it's right here behind me, actually, at the moment. That's the light box at the back here, which is in my studio here at Clyde Street, 50 Clyde Street. If we had more time, we could talk about this. There's a fantastic program that is linking the Clyde Street studios with the university and the FASTlab, and this is something that Paul is heavily involved in. In fact, we're going to be talking about that tomorrow night in another panel, which is on a new education model, a distributed education model that's being developed right here in Newcastle. But right now, because of lockdown, it's not possible to, of course, see these works. But however, the plan is for the actual garden exhibition that at this stage we're planning to have in December. Fingers crossed if COVID opens up enough that we can do that. Otherwise, we will be incrementally pushing back the exhibition. But the idea, and maybe you could just say something on that one, Paul, at least we talked about that we will be activating the Q building with all of these projects probably around that period as part of a series of activities that are happening here in Newcastle.
Yeah, absolutely, Christopher. And for those of you who are from outside Newcastle and Australia, one of the things that I've been really privileged to do as the head of School of Creative Industries here is to commission and to chair the building of a beautiful new building for creative industries. And unfortunately, we just got to the completion of that building, and apart from a couple of tours wearing masks, at the moment it stands deserted because we can't access the building because we're in lockdown and not allowed on campus. But we're absolutely committed to making sure that as soon as we can, there'll be one hell of a party. We absolutely want to make sure that we're making best use of that building, and I'm really keen to make sure that all the work that's been featured here, that some of which you've seen tonight, as well as a few of the other projects that we've been doing, get prominence in the physical, real world, so that people can actually come and interact with them and with us, and also showcase our, to be honest with you, it's a swanky new building. It's a major investment on behalf of the University of Newcastle into the creative industries, and I'm proud and pleased that we've got that far. So yes, we'll see as the pandemic and the lockdown eases. I'm hoping that we can stretch this out. Maybe, who knows, Christopher and Christopher and everybody else on the call, this could be a regular thing. We might just find now that we've got enough momentum between all of us to do lots of things off in that space in Q building on a fairly regular basis, and to be sharing those ideas with Singleton and to move them around the Hunter and to bring things in from the Hunter to feature them in Q. Build up that capacity and those relationships. That would be fantastic.
Thanks, Paul. And probably on that note, I'll just finish on this slide as well for those in the international audience that may be a little bit confused about where is this Singleton in relation to Newcastle. And you would have seen in a lot of the promotion material, our garden was the Ars Electronica garden, Newcastle and Hunter. You would have seen on some of the other materials. The Hunter is the region. Newcastle is the main biggest city within that Hunter region. But here you can see down on the bottom sort of right of screen, there's Newcastle on the ocean, and then you'll see the pinpoint there. There is Singleton. So it's about a 1 hour drive from Newcastle. But as Paul has just hinted towards, I get the feeling that it's really a little bit of a potential renaissance happening in the whole of the Hunter region and the possibilities. Thanks so much, Christopher, for your involvement in this project, in this program, for Singleton to take the initiative, to be brave, to take the risk, to be able to start to get into this kind of work. It's incredibly inspiring for me to see after so many years working at Ars Electronica in Austria and then coming back, being able to do this kind of work here. I think we could talk for a few more hours, guys. I'd love to, but I think I've already kept you long enough. Thanks so much for your participation in this discussion. Thanks for the audience that was here. Nicole, Christopher, Ralph, Paul, I can't thank you so much. I'm looking forward to our next catch up. And once again, to my colleagues, Neil Davey and Christy Hay behind the scenes, taking care of the technical side of this call. I thank you so much, and I wish you all a pleasant evening, and bye for now.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.